Do you feel a shiver up your spine from fear? Yes, it's another story from the Nightshade diary. You know what that means. Check under the bed and make sure no one or nothing is there. Is the closet door securely shut? Then leave your disbelief behind. Amp up your imagination and hang on tight for another ride into terror and mystery. And like all good horror stories, just imagine it's a dark and stormy night. And remember, screaming like a little girl is permitted. Needle in the Heart by Richard Matheson. April 23rd. At last, I have found a way to kill Therese. I am so happy I could cry. To end that vile dominion after all these years. What is the phrase? "'Tis a consummation devoutly to be wished." Well, I have wished it long enough. Now it is time to act. I will destroy Therese and regain my peace of mind. I will. What distresses me is that the book has been here in our library all these years. Why? I could have done it ages ago, avoiding all the agonies and cruel humiliations I have borne. Still, I must not think like that. I must be grateful I found it at all, and amused. How droll it really is that Therese was actually in the library with me when I came across the book. She, of course, was poring avidly over one of the many volumes of pornography left by father. I shall burn them all after I have killed Therese. Thank God our mother died before he started to collect them. Vile man that he was. Therese loved him to the end, of course. She's just like him, really. Brutish, carnal, and disgusting. Oh, I will sing for joy the day she dies. Yes, there she was. Below, darkly flushed with sensuality, while I, attempting to avoid the sight of her, moved about on the balcony where the older volumes are kept, and there I found it on an upper shelf. A film of gray dust on its pages. Voodoo, an authentic study by Dr. William Moriarty. It had been printed privately. The Lord only knows where or when father acquired it. The astounding thing, I perused it, bored, and then actually put it back in place. It was not until I had walked away from it and glanced through many other books that suddenly it came to me. I could kill Therese by use of voodoo. April 25th. My hand is trembling as I write this. I have almost completed the doll which represents Therese. Yes, almost completed it. I've made it from the cloth of one of her old dresses, which I found in the attic. I've used 2 tiny jeweled buttons for its eyes. There's more to do, of course, but the project is at last underway. I'm amused to consider what Dr. Ramsay would say if he discovered my plans. What would his initial reaction be? That I'm foolish to believe in voodoo? Or that I must learn to live with Therese if not to love her? Love that pig? Never. How I despise her. If I could, believe me, I would happily surrender my half of father's estate if it would mean that I would never have to see her dissipated face again, never have to listen to her drunken swearing, to her tales of lewd adventuring. But this is quite impossible. She will not leave me be. I have but one course left me, to destroy her. And I shall. I shall. Therese has only one more day to live. April 26th. I have it all now. All. Therese took a bath before she left tonight. The Lord knows what debaucheries. After the bath she cut her nails. And now I have them fastened to the doll with thread. And I have made the doll a head of hair from the strands I laboriously combed from Therese's brush. Now the doll truly is Therese. That is the beauty of voodoo. I hold Therese's life in my hands, free to choose for myself the moment of her destruction. I will wait and savor that delicious freedom. What will Dr. Ramsay say when Therese is dead? What can he say? That I am mad to think voodoo had killed her? Not that I will ever tell him, but it will. I will not lay a hand on her, as much as I would like to do it personally, crushing the breath from her throat. But no, I will survive. That is the joy of it, to kill Therese willfully and yet to live. That is the utter ecstasy of it. Tomorrow night, let her enjoy her last adventure. No more will she stagger in, her breath a reeking fume of whiskey, to regale me in lurid detail with the foul obscenities she had committed and enjoyed. no more will she. Oh, I cannot wait. I shall thrust a needle deep into the doll's heart, rid myself of her forever. Damn Therese, damn her. I shall kill her now. From the notebook of John H. Ramsay, M.D., April 27th. Poor Millicent is dead. Her housekeeper found her crumpled on the floor of her bedroom this morning, clutching at her heart, a lock of shock and agony frozen on her face. A heart attack, no doubt. No marks on her. Beside her, on the floor, was a tiny cloth doll with a needle piercing it. Poor Millicent. Had she some brain-sick notions of destroying me with voodoo? I had hoped she trusted me. Still, why should she have? I could never have helped her, really. Hers was a hopeless situation. Millicent Therese Marlowe suffered from the most advanced case of multiple personality it has ever been my misfortune to observe. The Wonderful Death of Dudley Stone by Ray Bradbury. Alive? Dead. Alive in New England, damn it. Died 20 years ago. Pass the hat. I'll go myself and bring back his head. That's how the talk went that night. A stranger set it off with his mouthings about Dudley Stone dead. Alive, we cried. And shouldn't we know? Weren't we the last frail remnants of those who had burnt incense and read his books by the light of blazing intellectual votives in the 20s? The Dudley Stone. That magnificent stylist, that proudest of literary lines. Surely you recall the head-pounding, the cliff-jumping, the whistlings of doom that followed on his writings as publishers. This note. Sirs, today, age 30, I retire from the field, renounce writing, burn all my effects, toss my latest manuscript on the dump, cry hail and fare thee well, yours affectionately, Dudley Stone. Earthquakes and avalanches, in that order. Why, we ask ourselves, meeting down the years. In fine soap opera fashion we debated if it was women who caused him to hurl his literary future away. Was it the bottle? Or horses that outran him and stopped a fine pacer in his prime? We freely admitted to one and all that we were stone writing now. Faulkner, Hemingway, and Steinbeck would be buried in his lava. All this sadder that Stone, on the brink of his greatest work, turned one day and went off to live in a town we shall call Obscurity, by the sea best named the past. Why? That question forever lived with those of us who had seen the glints of genius in his piebald works. One night a few weeks ago, musing off the erosion of the years, finding each other's faces somewhat more pouched and our hair more conspicuously in absence, we became enraged with the typical citizen's ignorance of Dudley Stone. At least, we mutter, Thomas Wolfe had a full measure of success before he seized his nose and jumped off the rim of eternity. At least the critics gathered to stare after his plunge into darkness as after a meteor that made much fire in its passing. But who now remembered Dudley Stone, his coteries, his frenzied followers of the 20s? Pass the hat, I said. I'll travel 300 miles, grab Dudley Stone by the pants and say, Look here, Mr. Stone, why did you let us down so badly? Why haven't you written a book in 25 years? The hat was lined with cash. I sent a telegram and took a train. I do not know what I expected. Perhaps to find a doddering and frail praying mantis whispering about the station, blown by sea winds, a chalk-white ghost who would husk at me with the voice of grass and reeds blown in the night. I clenched my knees in agony as my train shuffled into the station. I let myself down into a lonely countryside a mile from the sea, like a man foolishly insane, wondering why I had come so far. On a bulletin board in front of the boarded-up ticket office, I found a cluster of announcements, inches thick, pasted and nailed one upon another for uncountable years. Leafing under, peeling away anthropological layers of printed tissue, I found what I wanted. Dudley Stone for alderman. Dudley Stone for sheriff. Dudley Stone for mayor. On up through the years, his photograph, bleached by sun and rain, faintly recognizable, asked for ever more responsible positions in the life of this world near the sea. I stood reading them. Hey! And Dudley Stone plunged across the station platform behind me suddenly. Is that you, Mr. Douglas? I whirled to confront this great architecture of a man, big but not in the least fat, his legs, huge pistons, thrusting him on, a bright flower in his lap, a bright tie at his neck. He crushed my hand, looked down upon me like Michelangelo's God, creating Adam with a mighty touch. His face was the face of those illustrated north winds and south winds that blow hot and cold in ancient mariner charts. It was the face that symbolizes the sun in Egyptian carvings, ablaze with life. My God, I thought. And this is the man who hasn't written in 20-odd years? Impossible. He's so alive, it's sinful. I can hear his heartbeat. I must have stood with my eyes very wide to let the look of him cram in upon my startled senses. You thought you'd find Marley's ghost, he laughed. Admit it. I. My wife's waiting with a New England boiled dinner. We've plenty of ale and stout. I like the ring of those words. To ale is not to sicken, but to revive the flagging spirit. A tricky word that. And stout? There's a nice ready sound to it. Stout. A great golden watch bounced on his vest front, hung in bright chains. He vised my elbow and charmed me along, a magician well on his way back to his cave with a luckless rabbit. Glad to see you. I suppose you've come as the others came to ask the same question, huh? Well, this time I'll tell everything. My heart jumped. Wonderful! Behind the empty station sat an open-top 1927 vintage Model T Ford. Fresh air. Drive at twilight like this, you get all the fields, the grass, the flowers coming at you in the wind. I hope you're not one of those who tiptoe around shutting windows. Our house is like the top of a mesa. We let the weather do our broom work. Hop in. 10 minutes later, we swung off the highway onto a drive that had not been leveled or filled in years. Stone drove straight on over the pits and bumps, smiling steadily. Bang! We shuddered the last few yards to a wild, unpainted, two-story house. The car was allowed to gasp itself away into mortal silence. Do you want the truth? Stone turned to look at me in the face and hold my shoulder with an earnest hand. I was murdered by a man with a gun 25 years ago, almost to this very day. I sat staring after him as he leapt from the car. He was solid as a ton of rock, no ghost to him, but yet I knew that somehow the truth was in what he had told me before firing himself like a cannon at the house. This is my wife, and this is the house, and that is our supper waiting for us. Look at our view. Windows on 3 sides of the living room, a view of the sea, the shore, the meadows. We nail the windows open 3 out of 4 seasons. I swear, you get a smell of limes here midsummer, and something from Antarctica. Ammonia and ice cream come December. Sit down. Lena, isn't it nice having him here? I hope you like New England boiled dinner, said Lena, now here, now there, a tall, firmly built woman. The sun in the east, Father Christmas daughter, a bright lamp of a face that lit our table as she dealt out the heavy, useful dishes made to stand the pound of giant's fists. The cutlery was solid enough to take a lion's teeth. A great whiff of steam rose up, through which we gladly descended, sinners into hell. I saw the second plate skim by 3 times and felt the ballast gather in my chest, my throat, and at last my ears. Dudley Stone poured me a brew he had made from wild concords that had cried for mercy, he said. The wine bottle empty had its green glass mouth blown softly by Stone, who summoned out a rhythmic one-note tune that was quickly done. Well, I've kept you waiting long enough, he said, peering at me from that distance, which drinking adds between people, and which at odd turns in the evening seems closeness itself. I'll tell you about my murder. I've never told anyone before, believe me. Do you know John Otis Kendall? A minor writer in the 20s, wasn't he? I said, a few books. Burnt out by 31, died last week. God rest him, Mr. Stone. Lapsed into a special brief melancholy from which he revived. I began to speak again. Yes, John Otis Kendall, burnt out by the year 1931, a writer of great potentialities. Not as great as yours, I said quickly. Well, just wait. We were boys together, John Otis and I. Born where the shade of an oak tree touched my house in the morning and his house at night. swam every creek in the world together, got sick on sour apples and cigarettes together, saw the same lights in the same blonde hair of the same young girl together, and in our late teens went out to kick fate in the stomach and get beat on the head together. We both did fair, and then I better, and still better, as the years ran. If his first book got one nice notice, mine got six. If I got one bad notice, he got a dozen. We were like two friends on a train the public has uncoupled. There went John Otis on the caboose left behind crying out, "Save me! You're leaving me in Tanktown, Ohio. We're on the same track." And the conductor saying, "Yes, but not the same train." And myself yelling, "I believe in you, John. Be of good heart. I'll come back for you." And the caboose dwindling behind with its red and green lamps like cherry and lime pops shining in the dark, and we yelling our friendship to each other. "John, old man! Dudley, old pal!" While John Otis went out on a dark siding behind a tin baling shed at midnight, and my engine with all the flag wavers and brass bands boiled on toward dawn. Dudley Stone paused and noticed my look of general confusion. "All this to lead up to my murder," he said, for it was John Otis Kendall who in 1930 traded a few old clothes and some remaindered copies of his books for a gun and came out to this house and this room. He really meant to kill you? Meant to? Hell, he did! Bang! Have some more wine. That's better. A strawberry shortcake was set upon the table by Mrs. Stone, while he enjoyed my gibbering suspense. Stone sliced it into three huge chunks and served it around, fixing me with his kindly approximation of the wedding guest eye. There he sat. John Otis, in that chair where you sit now. Behind him, outside in the smokehouse, 17 hams. In our wine cellars, 500 bottles of the best. Beyond the window, open country, the elegant sea in full lace. Overhead a moon like a dish of cool cream. Everywhere the full panoply of spring. And lean across the table, too. A willow tree in the wind, laughing at everything I said. Or did not choose to say. Both of us 30, mind you. 30 years old. Life, our magnificent carousel. Our fingers playing full chords, my books selling well, fan mail pouring upon us in crisp white founts, horses in the stables for moonlight rides to coves where either we or the sea might whisper all we wished in the night. And John Oates, seated there where you sit now, quietly taking a little blue gun from his pocket. I laughed, thinking it was a cigar lighter of some sort, said his wife. But John Otis said quite seriously, "I'm going to kill you, Stone." "What did you do?" "Do?" I sat there stunned, riven. I heard a terrible slam, the coffin lid in my face. I heard coal down a black chute, dirt on my buried door. They say all your past hurdles by at such times nonsense. The future does. You see your face a bloody porridge. You sit there until your fumbling mouth can say, "But why, John? What have I done to you?" "Done!" he cried. His eyes skimmed along the vast bookshelf, and the handsome brigade of books drawn stiffly to attention there with my name on each blazing like a panther's eye in the Moroccan blackness. "Done!" he cried mortally, and his hand itched the revolver in a sweat. "Now, John," I cautioned, "what do you want?" "One thing more than anything else in the world," he said. "To kill you and be famous. Get my name in headlines. Be famous as you are famous. Be known for a lifetime and beyond as the man who killed Dudley Stone." "You can't mean that." "I do. I'll be very famous. Far more famous than I am today, in your shadow. Oh, listen here. No one in the world knows how to hate like a writer does. God, how I love your work, and God, how I hate you. Because you write so well. Amazing ambivalence. But I can't take it anymore, not being able to write as you do. So I'll take my fame the easy way. I'll cut you off before you reach your prime. They say your next book will be your very finest, your most brilliant. They exaggerate. My guess is they're right," he said. I looked beyond him to Lena, who sat in her chair frightened, but not frightened enough to scream or run and spoil the scene so it might end inadvertently. "Calm," I said, "calmness. Sit there, John. Ask only 1 minute. Then pull the trigger." "No," Lena whispered. "Calmness," I said to her, to myself, to John Otis. I gazed out the open window. I felt the wind. I thought of the wine in the cellar, the coves at the beach, the sea, the night moon like a disk of menthol cooling the summer heavens, drawing clouds of flaming salt, the stars, after in a wheel toward morning. I thought of myself only 30, Lena 30, our whole lives ahead. I thought of all the flesh of life hung high and waiting for me to really start banqueting. I had never climbed a mountain. I had never sailed an ocean. I had never run for mayor. I had never dived for pearls. I had never owned a telescope. I had never acted on a stage or built a house or read all the classics. I had so wished to read all the actions to be done. So in that almost instantaneous 60 seconds, I thought at last of my career. The books I had written, the books I was writing, the books I intended to write, the reviews, the sales, our huge balance in the bank. And believe or disbelieve me, for the first time in my life, I got free of it all. I became, in one moment, a critic. I cleared the scales. On one hand, I put all the boats I hadn't taken, the flowers I hadn't planted, the children I hadn't raised, all the hills I hadn't looked at, with Lena there, goddess of the harvest. In the middle, I put John Otis Kendall with his gun, the upright that held the balances. And on the empty scale opposite, I laid my pen, my ink, my empty paper, my dozen books. I made some minor adjustments. The 60 seconds were ticking by. The sweet night wind blew across the table. It touched a curl of hair on Lena's neck. Oh Lord, how softly, softly it touched. The gun pointed at me. I have seen the moon craters in photographs, and that hole in space called the Great Coal Sack Nebula. But neither was as big, take my word, as the mouth of that gun across the room from me. John, I said at last, do you hate me that much? Because I've been lucky and you not? Yes, damn it, he cried. It was almost funny he should envy me. I was not that much better a writer than he. A flick of the wrist made the difference. John, I said quietly to him, if you want me dead, I'll be dead. Would you like for me to never write again? I'd like nothing better, he cried. Get ready. He aimed at my heart. All right, I said, I'll never write again. What? He said. We're old friends. We've never lied to each other, have we? Then take my word. From this night on, I'll never put pen to paper. Oh God, he said, and laughed with contempt and disbelief. There, I said, nodding my head at the desk near him, are the only original copies of the two books I've been working on for the last 3 years. I'll burn one in front of you now. The other you yourself may throw in the sea. Clean out the house, take everything faintly resembling literature, burn my published books, too. Here, I got up. He could have shot me then, but I had him fascinated. I tossed one manuscript on the hearth and touched a match to it. No, Lena said. I turned. I know what I'm doing, I said. She began to cry. John Otis Kendall simply stared at me, bewitched. I brought him the other unpublished manuscript. Here, I said, tucking it under his right shoe so his foot was a paperweight. I went back and sat down. The wind was blowing and the night was warm, and Lena was white as apple blossoms there across the table. I said, from this day forward, I will not write ever again. At last, John Otis managed to say, how can you do this? To make everyone happy, I said. To make you happy because we'll be friends again, eventually. To make Lena happy because I'll just be her husband again. I know agents performing seal. And myself happy because I'd rather be a live man than a dead author. A dying man will do anything, John. Now take my last novel and get along with you. We sat there, the three of us, just as we three are sitting tonight. There was a smell of lemons and limes and camellias. The ocean roared on the stony coastline below. God, what a lovely moonlit sound. And at last, picking up the manuscript, John Otis took them, like my body, out of the room. He paused at the door and said, I believe you. And then he was gone. I heard him drive away. I put Lena to bed. There was one of the few nights in my life I ever walked down by the shore. But walk I did, taking deep breaths and feeling my arms and legs and my face with my hands, crying like a child, walking and waiting in the surf to feel the cold salt water foaming about me in a million suds. Dudley Stone paused. Time had made a stop in the room. Time was in another year. The three of us sitting there, enchanted with his telling of the murder. "And did he destroy your last novel?" I asked. Dudley Stone nodded. "A week later, one of the pages drifted up on the shore. He must have thrown them over the cliff. 1,000 pages. I see it in my mind's eye. A flock of white seagulls, it might seem, flying down to the water and going out with the tide at 4 in the black morning. Lena ran up the beach with that single page in her hand, crying, 'Look, look!' And when I saw what she handed me, I tossed it back in the ocean." "Don't tell me you honored your promise." Dudley Stone looked at me steadily. "What would you have done in a similar position?" "Look at it this way. John Otis did me a favor. He didn't kill me. He didn't shoot me. He took my word. He honored my word. He let me live. He let me go on eating and sleeping and breathing. Quite suddenly, he had broadened my horizons. I was so grateful that standing on the beach, hip deep in water that night, I cried. I was grateful. Do you really understand that word? Grateful. He had let me live, when he had had it in his hand to annihilate me forever." Mrs. Stone rose up. The dinner was ended. She cleared the dishes, we lit cigars, and Dudley Stone strolled me over to his office at home, a roll-up desk, its jaws propped wide with parcels and papers and ink bottles, a typewriter, documents, ledgers, indexes. It was all rolling to a boil in me. John Otis simply spooned the froth off the top so that I could see the brew. "It was very clear," said Dudley Stone. "Writing was always so much mustard and gallweed to me. Fidgeting words on paper, experiencing vast depressions of heart and soul, watching the greedy critics graft me up, chart me down, slice me like sausage, eat me at midnight breakfast. Work of the worst sort. I was ready to fling the pack. My trigger was set. Boom! There was John Otis. Look here." He rummaged in the desk and brought forth handbills and posters. "I had been writing about living. Now I wanted to live. Do things instead of tell about them. I ran for the Board of Education. I won. I ran for alderman. I won. I ran for mayor. I won. Sheriff, town librarian, sewage disposal official. I shook a lot of hands, saw a lot of life, did a lot of things. We've lived every way there is to live, with our eyes and noses and mouths, with our ears and hands. We've climbed hills and painted pictures. There are some on the wall. We've been 3 times around the world. I even delivered our baby son unexpectedly. He's grown and married now, lives in New York. We've done and done again." Stone paused and smiled. "Come on out in the yard. We've set up a telescope. Would you like to see the rings of Saturn?" We stood in the yard, and the wind blew from 1,000 miles at sea, and while we were standing there, looking at the stars through the telescope, Mrs. Stone went down into the midnight cellar after a rare Spanish wine. It was noon the next day when we reached the lonely station after a hurricane trip across the jouncing meadows from the sea. Mr. Dudley Stone let the car have its head, while he talked to me, laughing, smiling, pointing to this or that outcrop of Neolithic stone, this or that wild flower, falling silent again, only as we parked and waited for the train to come and take me away. "I suppose," he said, looking at the sky, "you think I'm quite insane." "No, I'd never say that." "Well," said Dudley Stone, "John Otis Kendall did me one other favor." "What was that?" Stone hitched around conversationally in the patched leather seat. "He helped me get out when the going was good. Deep down inside, I must have guessed that my literary success was something that would melt when they turned off the cooling system. My subconscious had a pretty fair picture of my future. I knew what none of my critics knew, that I was headed nowhere but down. The 2 books John Otis destroyed were very bad. They would have killed me deader than Otis possibly could. So he helped me decide, unwittingly, what I might not have had the courage to decide myself, to bow gracefully out while the cotillion was still on, while the Chinese lanterns still cast flattering pink lights on my Harvard complexion. I had seen too many writers up, down, and out, hurt, unhappy, suicidal. The combination of circumstances, coincidence, subconscious knowledge, relief, and gratitude to John Otis Kendall to just be alive were fortuitous, to say the least. We sat in the warm sunlight another minute. And then I had the pleasure of seeing myself compared to all the greats when I announced my departure from the literary scene. Few authors in recent history have bowed out to such publicity. It was a lovely funeral. I looked, as they say, natural, and the echoes lingered. His next book, the critics cried, would have been it, a masterpiece. I had them panting, waiting. Little did they know. Even now, a quarter century later, my readers, who were college boys, then make sooty excursions on drafty kerosene stinking short line trains to solve the mystery of why I've made them wait so long for my masterpiece. And thanks to John Otis Kendall, I still have a little reputation. It has receded slowly, painlessly. The next year, I might have died by my own writing hand. How much better to cut your own caboose off the train before others do it for you. My friendship with John Otis Kendall, it came back. It took time, of course, but he was out here to see me in 1947. It was a nice day all around, like old times. Now he's dead, and at last I've told someone everything. What will you tell your friends in the city? They won't believe a word of this, but it is true. I swear it. As I sit here and breathe God's good air and look at the calluses on my hand, I begin to resemble that faded handbills I used when I ran for county treasurer. We stood at the station platform. Goodbye, and thanks for coming and opening your ears and letting my world crash in on you. God bless to all your curious friends. Here comes the train. I've got to run. Lena and I are going to a Red Cross drive down the coast this afternoon. Goodbye. I watched the dead man stomp and leap across the platform, felt the planking shudder, saw him jump into his Model T, heard it lurch under the bulk, saw him bang the floorboards with a big foot, idle the motor, roar it, turn, smile, wave to me, and then roar off and away toward that suddenly brilliant town called obscurity by a dazzling seashore called the past.